Everyone, welcome to join this week's GW4 Water Security Alliance seminar. Today, we're very happy to have Dr. Priscilla Alves. She agreed to give this talk from the United States remotely, so it's very early for her. And Priscilla, she in the past few years, she has studied the PhD at the University of Exeter, and she completed her PhD and now got opportunity working at the University of Maryland. And so on the flood research, so she will be talking about today. So about her PhD work and some of her research. So she will give you the seminar, and so if you have any question during her talk, please, you are welcome to put your question in the chat, and or you can raise your hand at the end of her talk and you can ask her the question by yourself. So I will hand this to Priscilla.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Albert. Thank you. Let me just try to share my screen, and if you can just let me know if you can see it.
Yes. Good.
Yeah. So I just want to start saying how happy I am to be back, and Exeter is it's something that it's always in my mind. So it's very nice to be here and to stay with you a little while, share about this PhD and everything that I did. So it's very nice to be back. And so thank you a lot for the invitation. So today I want to share about my PhD. So the work that I did on my PhD, it will be mainly about it. The title of my PhD was an integrated spatial-participatory approach for flood risk mitigation in the semi-arid region of Brazil. My name is Dr. Priscilla Alves, and my supervisors during the PhD was Professor Slobodan Djordjevic and also Professor Akbar Javari. So you probably know them, of course. And so they were my supervisors. I just wanted to start speaking a little bit of my background about myself and where I am now, just to give a little bit of context. I've seen some people in the list of participants that I know, so you probably know this, but other people I don't know yet. So I thought about starting with myself. So I'm from Brazil, and that's the reason that the PhD is also in a Brazilian context. I'm Brazilian. I'm a civil engineer, so I finished my degree in civil engineering in the Federal University of Campina Grande in 2015. So I started in 2010, more than 10 years ago, and then I finalized my degree in civil engineering. When I was doing my degree, I had the first opportunity to go abroad. So at that time, I came here to the US, not in the university that I am now, but to the University of New Mexico. So that was the first time that I actually was studying water, flooding, drought, and all of this. I was part of a project from the University of Campina Grande and also the University of New Mexico. It was kind of a bilateral funding that I got. So that's the first time that I went abroad to study about flooding, as I was saying. I think this was, that moment in the life where everything changes. So after this experience, I actually thought, okay, this is actually possible. So go abroad and actually study in other contexts. So that's when I came back to Brazil to finish my degree, I started my master's in flooding mitigation in the same university, so the University of Campina Grande. But then I started thinking, okay, I actually can go abroad again to do my PhD. So that's the moment where I came to Exeter, where I went to the UK. And then I started my PhD in 2017, which I finished last year in 2021. And now, right after the end of my PhD, I started a postdoc in Exeter with Albert, with Slobodan, with Jess, that I see that she is on the participants list. But now I am here on the US. I'm back to the US now, and I am the manager. So now I am the manager and the postdoc of the Stormwater Infrastructure, Resilience and Justice Lab, which is on the University of Maryland. And I also saw that my supervisor here, Professor Marcus Hendricks, he's also on the call, so he's also here today. So now I am on the University of Maryland, just to give you a little bit of context of my background. But let's go to my thesis, to my PhD. So my PhD, it is inside the theme of extreme events. I just put here some photos for you where you can see that flooding, especially flooding, it's happening everywhere. It's not just a problem restricted to one or another country. This actually happens in many places, and sometimes inside each country, we're gonna have flooding cases in different cities. Sometimes in the same city, we have areas that will be prone for the flooding and other areas that won't be prone for flooding. The thing that it is interesting when we see, for example, these photos of the USA, of China, of the UK, of Germany. This was a very strong event that happened last year. I think you remember this one. Is that we also see that the flooding is actually bringing impacts to the people, sometimes to infrastructure, sometimes to transportation, sometimes to the properties of people, to their homes, to their households. It's actually one of these extreme events that can happen in a daily basis if we think like this, and actually is bringing problems if we don't apply solutions, or if we don't try to mitigate them. It can bring problems in many days during the year. So it's always impacting people. If there is exposure of people over there, it will bring impact for these people. The other part of my PhD is also worried with when the same area will have more than one extreme event. And this is the case of the case study of my PhD. So you can see on this graph that I prepared for you, where we can see the drought risk in orange and where we can see the flood risk in blue. So each square, it will be a geographical area. So it's just a place. So the same area can have a high degree of risk, so of drought, for example, and another area can have, so this will be the first one, and another area can have a high degree of flooding. So this will be the second square, the red ones. But some of these areas can actually have the two events, the two extreme events at the same time. So they will face flooding and also drought. And when we have this context, it's very challenging, if we can say like this, because the people that are living in this place, they will have impacts, but related to the two extreme events sometimes at the same time. So imagine that you are living in an area that you are facing drought, but it just in a random day, it starts raining. It's a strong rainfall, it's a thunderstorm, it's a very strong rainfall, and then suddenly the same household, the same person is also facing flooding inside their home. So they are exposed to the two extreme events at the same time. So I just put two papers that, if you are interested on this theme, it's very nice that you can see the impacts of flooding and drought together and how we can propose solutions for the two extreme events, and also the impacts of multiple hazards, so multiple risks, but also COVID. This is what happened now with the pandemic, because we still have the extreme events, but we also have the pandemic now. So it is another risk that people are facing. But what exactly is disaster risk? So in my thesis, I'm considering that the risk will be this relationship between the hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. So I'm considering that there is not such thing as a natural disaster. We have this is a discussion among environmental and social scientists. So people are actually speaking about this and trying to find what's the best definition of risk. In my research, I'm considering that we'll need to have the three variables together. So hazard, exposure, and also vulnerability. Just for you to see what I'm considering in the research is that, as I said before, we have a geographical area, we have a pixel, which is the squares that you can see on my slide. And this pixel, this geographic area, will have the variable of hazard, vulnerability, and exposure. But what is interesting is that this variable will have a spatial characteristics. So it can be the location of infrastructure, the location of drainage elements, but also social characteristics, which actually indicates that we may have people living there. So each people will have a different context, they'll have different ages, they'll have different genders, sometimes they have children, sometimes they have some elderly living in the same place. So all of these characteristics together, all of these variables together, will bring different challenges for people to actually cope with the two extreme events at the same time, if we are considering flooding and drought. And just to finish this start, I just wanted to share that I'm also dealing with solutions for flooding mitigation. So we know that if we have a look in the different international reports and institution, everyone is actually saying that they're sustainable. And with this, I know that sometimes people consider the solutions as sustainable or not. So just a few examples, we have nature-based solutions, we have low impact development, green infrastructure, blue-green infrastructure, best management practice, which are solutions that try to bring back the state before urbanization. So it's actually considering that we can include green areas in different shapes and forms inside the geographic space, and we can try to reduce the flooding if we are considering flooding, with also providing other benefits. So the main point of these areas are actually to provide multiple benefits for the people. I just wanted to share a little bit about the context of Brazil, since I think that not all of you went there before. So I just put here some news. I'm aware that you cannot understand it because it's in Portuguese. I just wanted to share 4 cases of Brazilian flooding case that happened since December of last year to this year, to actually last month. So we had 5 months from December 2021 to May 2022. So the first one is the Bahia state. This is a whole state in Brazil, and we can see that in December we had this rainfall it was almost a week of rainfall, and we had 72 cities facing flood emergency in the country, in the state, sorry. So you can see all of the red municipalities in the slide. One thing that's very interesting is that many of the people that were in a severe situation of vulnerability, of flood vulnerability, they also have a very high, severe situation of social vulnerability. These households, they are located in areas that actually are at risk of landslide and flooding. So it is very important to actually look to this population in a different way, because their homes, their households are located in the areas that are prone to landslide and flooding. When you go to other places in Brazil, so this one is in Petrópolis, Rio de Janeiro, it's a whole different state in Brazil. And we saw this event that actually have 231 fatalities. So this also happened in a series of days. So in a few days, we had this strong rainfall. One of the municipalities, they had almost 300 millimeters of rainfall. So it was a very strong rainfall. And again, we can see lots of sources of vulnerabilities, of places that can face landslide and flooding. We see poverty. We see lots of sources of vulnerability in this place. This other case is in Recife. It's a whole different state in Brazil. These are some videos. You can see. This was actually recorded by a friend of mine. So this happened last month. So this is a very strong city in Brazil. It's a very important one, economic place, institutional city. But then they are also facing lots of floodings. And actually in this event, we had almost 130 fatalities in a few days of rainfall. And the last one, it is the study case of my thesis. It is the city of Campina Grande. So you can see this. Oops. You can see this short video. This happened in 2020. And you can see a little bit of the condition of Campina Grande related to the flooding. So we had an event last week in Campina Grande, 10 days ago, I think, 20 days ago, and nobody died, which was great, of course. But then we had 70 people that were displaced from their homes in the city that I was studying in my PhD. So I just thought about showing you some part of these videos where you can see a little bit the context of Brazil. So the main goal of my thesis, it was actually to develop an integrated framework, and that's why we have the theme that I showed you in the talk today. So to develop an integrated framework that aims for flood risk mitigation in vulnerable regions, especially for the case of Brazil. So my thesis is actually considering all of the variables that I said for you before. So I'm considering the risk, vulnerability, hazard, exposure, but also the integration between the social and spatial elements in the catchment. So how can I actually look for the social and spatial elements through a lens that's actually considering vulnerability, hazard, and exposure? So the main objectives of the thesis are rooted in the assumption that the proposal of solutions for risk mitigation must be accompanied, must walk together with the social understanding of the area. So we need to understand what are the needs of the place in order to propose solutions for the place, for the city, for example, in my case. I'm calling the framework as the needs for action framework. We have two big phases, which are the needs and the action, as you can see on the slide. Inside the whole methodology, we also built some sub-phases, which I'm calling from phase 1 until phase 6, which, since we don't have lots of time today, I'm just sharing you briefly about the phases. So the needs, the main point will be understand the area, so the needs of the place, and the action will be actually to propose some solutions for the area, so analyze the effectiveness of sustainable solutions, of nature-based solutions. And I just go beyond in the different chapters of my thesis. I start working with each one of the phases, which I will explain for you later. So this is the overall methodology of my PhD. And just to give you a little bit of context of the case study again, so the city of Campina Grande is a city with 400,000 residents, at least this. This is only an estimation because we are still waiting for the new census to come. And it is a city that's actually facing water shortage, but also flooding. So we have problems. It is the city of Campina Grande is inside the semi-arid region of Brazil. So we face drought, and we also face flooding. So that's why I was showing you before in the beginning of the talk about the multiple extreme events in the same area. You can see the map on the slide where I put different points. Each one of these one indicates areas that had flood cases in the past. So it is 360 points in the city that actually face flooding in different years, but actually face the flooding inside Campina Grande. As I was saying, my approach, the needs for action framework, has a social component, which I had the strategy that I thought about doing it, about analyzing the social aspects of the city, was to actually engage with the people. So I developed this project, which I'm calling as PLANEJEEE. It is from the name in Portuguese, so Planeje Eventos Extremos, which actually means to plan extreme events. And it is a citizen science, a community-based work where I went to Campina Grande a couple of times, and then I tried as much as I could to engage with the people. So I'm going to show you some photos of the engagement and how I actually did the PLANEJEEE project. As I showed you before, the methodology of my work, the one that I developed, has two main phases. So the needs for action. So I actually applied the participatory approach in Campina Grande in the two phases. So I went twice to Brazil, one to cover the needs, so to understand the social aspects of the city. And actually later I went again in the action phases, where I was able to analyze some solutions to flooding mitigation in Campina Grande. So in the end, I had 255 participants that were engaging in different strategies, which I will say for you later. And I had 172 residents, 27 specialists and policymakers in the phase one. In the phase two, we were already with the pandemic. So I decided to not engage with the residents because it was very dangerous at the time. And then to the second phase, to the action phase, I actually engaged with 56 participants, but I wasn't able to go in apply door-to-door surveys with the residents because of the pandemic. So in total, I have 255 participants engaging in the methodology. This is just some of the strategies that I applied, just to clarify for you. So I did some meetings and focus groups. I actually engaged with everyone, with residents, specialists, and policymakers with social media. So I did formal invitation for meetings, for workshop. I did some online and in-person surveys. The public participation was mainly through door-to-door surveys. So I went to the field and applied surveys with them. And I also had the support of the Civil Defense and the City Council of Campina Grande, which was very important. So we did some Instagram account and we start speaking with the people over there. Another support that was very important was from the Federal University of Campina Grande. And let me just have some water. And it was very nice to actually have the support of the university, because I needed to actually, I needed some help to apply all of this because I was living on the UK. So I selected 10 students to help me during the participatory approaches in Brazil, and then I had the support of the Federal University of Campina Grande too. So you can see some photos here of the places where we applied the questionnaires. Another thing that it was very important is that the residents, they could actually share a little bit of their experiences with the flooding. So you can see that they were indicating a little bit of the flooding height, that they had water inside their homes in different neighborhoods of Campina. This is another photo. And this is just a short video where you can see a little bit of the situation over there. So, and you can see lots of sorts of vulnerabilities, a little bit of their properties, how they live, in some of the locations that we had more flooding cases in the city. Sorry about that. Some photos about the engagement, so about the workshop that I did. So we had some maps where everyone, they could participate and actually say some solutions, say what they think that would be the best for the city. And on the phase 2, because of the pandemic, as I said, we decided to keep only smaller meetings, so less participants, always following health safety and following the UK, the British, and the Brazilian legislations to do this. At this phase, I only engage with specialists and policymakers, so some photos about that as well, with the mask and everything. So just moving to the results, we were happy enough during the PhD to actually publish different articles. So we had a list of 6 articles that were published. And as I'm dealing with different things inside the thesis, I was moving around inside the phases of the integrated approach, so the needs for action. And I will share with you briefly some of the results that we had with the PhD. Of course, that more details about the PhD are inside the articles and also the thesis itself, the PhD. So I'm happy to answer the different questions, of course. But here, since we don't have much time, I'm just giving you a brief overview of the results that we had. So the first part, as I said, is about the needs. So understanding the needs of the place to actually propose some actions. So this was from the first part of the participatory approach in 2019, where we had 172 residents participating of the engagement strategies. And at this phase, we actually collected some information about these residents. So social factors such as gender, age, children, as I was saying, house ownership, education, direct and indirect experiences, hazard proximity, management trust, but we will also work with the risk perception that they have and also their coping capacity. So at this point, we selected different indicators where we could analyze what was the risk perception towards flooding and also water shortage. So at this phase, we are also analyzing the water shortage and the coping capacity that they have related to the 2 extreme events. And also we wanted to hear from them what were the solutions that they were facing, that they see, actually, that they see that can support the flooding and water shortage mitigation. So this phase was very nice to see how they actually see that would be the best solutions for the area. The results were for flooding and also water shortage. And one thing that's very interesting is that since they are facing more water shortage because we are in a semi-arid region, so they have more risk perception to the drought than to the flooding. Similarly, they have more solutions applied in their homes for the water shortage than to the flooding. So the results were indicating that they have more awareness, they have more preparedness and worried related to the water shortage than to the flooding in Campina Grande. So that's the second graph that you can see on the slide. So we consider the spatial and temporal differences inside the catchment related to the 2 extreme events. Another thing that it was very interesting is that they see the challenges for coping with the 2 extreme events in a different way. So we also analyze the trust, the information, and the incentive that they receive from the management, from the government agencies. So we saw on the result, this is the second graph that you can see on the slide with the blue dots and the orange dots. You can see that people have more trust incentive and information related to drought than to the flooding. So when we were applying the questionnaire about the flooding itself, we could see that they don't trust the management agencies. They don't feel that they have an incentive. When we were applying the questions for incentive, we wanted to hear not only financial support, but also any other type of support. So of other agencies that they could provide. So they said that they don't feel that they have an incentive to cope with the flooding, and also they don't know much information about how to do it. So they were always complaining that they don't know what to do before the flooding and how they actually can mitigate the impacts. They don't know it. So they were always agreeing that they need more information about how to mitigate the flooding in their homes. Just a hypothetical situation would be the best solution would be where we have the three challenges together. So we would have more information, we would have more trust, and we would have more incentive. And then people felt, they were saying that they would have less vulnerability and then more resilience to cope with the two extreme events at the same time. So on the needs of the place, we saw that different sets of variables need to be improved, because people, they actually just don't need to apply some solution in the streets or properties, but they need more than this. So they need more information, they need to trust more, they need to communicate more with the government agencies, civil defense, the city council. So in this article, this is one of the articles that we published, we provide then a list of the solutions that can be applied for the people to actually cope with the two extreme events. When we started the spatial part of the methodology, so mapping, and then we, at this phase, we use the ArcGIS Pro to map the flooding vulnerabilities of Campina Grande. So we selected different indicators. You can see the methodology on your screen. So we had different phases, social and environmental phases. And then with the responses from the questionnaire, the workshop, the focus groups, with residents, specialists, and policymakers, we were able to select this list of indicators where we could actually map the flooding vulnerabilities of Campina Grande. So we consider that vulnerability is multidimensional, which means that it is a set of institutional, social, and structural aspects. So vulnerability is dynamic. And we had the participation of almost 200 people on this phase. So these are some of the maps that we had. So we did the flooding vulnerability maps and also the exposure of residents and critical infrastructure. So the location of schools, of hospitals, of the GPs in Campina Grande, where all of the places that we thought that we could actually have more impacts if we had the flooding events. All of this was made inside the GIS environment, so ArcGIS Pro. The list of indicators considers the increase of urbanization, the location of buildings in risk areas, the presence or not of drainage infrastructure, the intervention, so some solutions that the city has, for example, some green areas that are position is spread inside the catchment, and also the legislation that are in place. So we put all of these variables together. On this phase, we use the entropy method for computing the weights between the indicators, and then we have the map that you can see on the slide now, on the presentation. So all of the maps were validated with the second phase of the participatory approach. So I went and then I presented the maps, and then I discussed it with the city council about the results, and they were saying their opinion. So we started changing the weights, and then we did the calibration and validation of the methodology with also the participation of stakeholders. in the second part of the methodology is about the action. So in the beginning, I prepared this methodology with only 3 urban catchments of Campina Grande. And then I applied some nature-based solutions inside the method. So at this point, I was using SWMM model. And then I included green roofs, permeable pavements, and rain gardens in the city. The location of each one of this strategy was based on legislation and also the land use. So I was checking the land use of the area and also seeing what would be the best place to include the solution. So I did 2 scenarios, which scenario 1 was the urbanization as it is now, and scenario 2 was actually with urban growth. So this was made through with SWMM, as I said, and also ArcMap. And then the results are we have a different range of results because we did 30 scenarios of modeling, but the best set of solutions was always with the combination of strategies. So this result was an indication that probably not only one solution was effective, but actually a different set of solutions that could be applied in the city. And then we use this knowledge to actually build a model for the entire city. And this is the final part of my presentation today. So we actually applied the solutions, the nature-based solutions with CADDIES, which is one software that it was developed from the University of Exeter, as you probably know. So I was using CADDIES, and then we applied the different nature-based solutions. So at this time, I was applying green roofs, permeable pavements, green areas, rainwater harvesting, and drainage system improvements. And then all of the solutions in a combination as well. So here are some of the maps. And then this was also developed with the participation of stakeholders in the second phase of the methodology. So I did for different return periods, so 10, 25, and 100 years of the nature-based alone, and also in combination. So you, similarly to the first part of the methodology, the best set of solutions were also for the combination of solutions in Campina Grande. At this point, we are also analyzing environmental, social, and economic benefits. So we were considering the gaps in the proposal of nature-based solutions that goes beyond to only consider the environmental aspects. So this is a different paper, as I was saying for you before, but we were considering how actually the solutions, they can be influenced by urban growth. So we prepared this other article where we could see the flood increase with the urban growth of Campina Grande, and we saw that if nothing is made in the city, then we're going to have 52% of flood increase in different pixels in Campina Grande. So actually shows to us the importance of actually doing something now, where we are still waiting for the urban growth to come. So just a few conclusions, and I'm finishing now the talk. So in my PhD, we saw this relationship between the social and environmental aspects. So this should be considered for flood risk reduction. Actually, in the first phase of the methodology, I was also dealing with water shortage, so drought. So the social and environmental aspects will be key for the reduction of extreme events. When I was analyzing the disaster risk itself, so the flooding risk, the results showed that the risk distributed in different ways within the same study area. So, which makes that not all of the solutions are the best for all of the places together. So the solutions for risk mitigation should be proposed according to the needs of the place, which is the point of the whole methodology, the needs for action methodology. Residents, especially those who live with risk on a daily basis, they want to participate in the risk reduction process. This was something very important with the engagement, because it was very clear that they wanted to participate, they wanted to be involved somehow. They were actually asking how they could be involved in the risk mitigation process, because they don't want to live with the risk anymore. So they were very keen to participate. But at the same time, even when they had the previous experience with the flooding or water shortage, this was not enough for them to actually apply any solution to mitigate the flooding. So they actually need the triad of challenges, as I was saying for you before. We need to build the trust with the authorities, we need to give more information, and we also need to give more incentives for the people. And about the nature-based solutions, they will have different efficiencies in the place, that's why it is so important to consider the needs of the area. So not all green solutions will be effective everywhere. So that's why it is important to actually see what is really effective in the area that we are studying. And solutions can actually provide more than only the environmental benefit, but also the social and economics benefits. So you saw on these last slides some of the photos. I told you that I had a team of 10 students helping me to apply the engagement strategy. So you can see some of their photos there, and also some of the photos of us applying the questionnaires in Campina Grande. And just very briefly, some of the challenges that we had during the participatory approach. So about the vision of work, so everyone, on the same page of applying the engagement strategies, networking, how to contact the participants, forms of communication that are different for residents, authorities, and also specialists. And I think it's very important to listen to them. So take some time to actually listen what the residents are saying for you, what the authorities are actually saying for you, and also have the support of community members, of in our case, the Federal University, the civil defense was very important. With the spatial approach, it was hard because we had this different set of data. So put all of the data together in different shapes and forms and resolutions in different softwares. So this is a challenge, and asked a lot of time to actually do this. Just finishing, we were happy enough in the PhD that the research was actually published in the New York Times, which was very nice. I put the link here for you where you can see. And then I think it's just to highlight the importance of actually considering the multiple extreme events that can happen at the same time. This was exactly the theme of this publication. So when we actually have one place that's facing more than one hazard at the same time. So I put the link for you in case you want to see. And then that's it. I just want to thank you for listening to me, and thank you, the University of Exeter, for all of the support. I really couldn't have done this without the University of Exeter, the support, my supervisors, all of the funding, and everyone that actually helped me somehow. I see some people in the participants list that were very important to me and for my PhD. So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation today.